Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States Most Wanted cyber criminal, now good guy, and host of The Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode number 65, another Anglerfish flashback. Today, parts 5 and 6. Part number 5, my crimes, shoplifting, scams, assault, and more. The original Internet Godfather, that's me. I catalog my first crimes and talk about those victims. That's followed immediately by part 6, getting away. Me and my sister Denise, we talk about getting out of a horrible situation. Please enjoy parts 5 and 6 of the Anglerfish Flashback, where we re-upload some of the past episodes of the Anglerfish podcast. We'll have a new episode out on Thursday. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to tune in and listen. If you like it, please subscribe. If you don't like it, please subscribe. And let me hear your feedback, because I read every single bit of it and I respond to most of it. Without further ado, part 5 of the Anglerfish podcast. Dad was all set to fly drugs back and forth across the Mexico-Texas border when Tommy Allen Combs, the guy who had hired Dad for this job, decided he was going to hold court in the street. Mom and Dad, they ended up listening to the shootout on the radio, and that night they saw it on the evening news. Needless to say, Tommy Allen Combs, well, he was no longer of this planet by that night. And Mom and Dad, I guess that left a sour taste in their mouth, because they decided that maybe, perhaps, possibly, running drugs back and forth across the border, probably not the best idea in the world. So Ma and Paul Johnson started doing what many in Eastern Kentucky decide they're going to do. They resorted to small and medium-level fraud and scams. I mean, hell, you've got to eat, right? And one thing about fraud and crime in general, criminals tend to work with the tools which they are given. Which Eastern Kentucky in the 1980s? Not many tools around. The internet certainly wasn't there. Plus, Mom and Dad, not really what you'd consider hardened criminals. They were more criminals of the opportunistic variety. The tools available to Ray and Carol Sue? Well, Dad had already had his dreams of running drugs shot down with Tommy Allen. So what was left? Well, they had a car. Now, I can't tell you the number of cars and homes which have met untimely ends at the hands of Ray Johnson and Carol Sue, whatever her last name may be right now. And yes, I don't even know my mom's last name. See, Mom has a bit of a problem being truthful with anyone, even her kids. I do know the first car they did away with was a Ford LTD. I think it was a 1979 model, dark blue. Dad was laid off from mining. You see, unemployment and food stamps weren't cutting it for paying the bills. We had a lot of yard sales. We tried to sell things for extra money to survive. We even ended up going to these auctions where people would sell their old household crap. We'd buy it and try to resell it at yard sales to try to make more money. Looking back, we were always short on money. We did well while Dad was in the military, but once he was shooed out, well, things went south pretty quickly. So my parents did what they could. And then one day, one of them, I don't remember which one, they mentioned that LTD. You know, we got that Ford out there. And we could put full coverage on it. And then what would we drive, genius? Well, we could buy a car at the auction. Wouldn't be that much. It could give us some extra money. Now, here's the thing. My dad lacks motivation. He always has. Give him a recliner and a TV and he tends to be pretty happy. That isn't to say he won't work, though. My dad worked his ass off trying to provide for us and trying to make Carol Sue happy. It's just that Dad never really had any real ambition. Very bright man, just not driven by much of anything except his love for my mom. Mom, though? Oh, shit. Motivation from hell. She was the driving wheel. She wanted money. She wanted nice things. Her problem was she didn't really want to have to work for them. She went to school and became an LPN, very sporadic job history. She would hold a job for a couple of weeks, couple of months, and she'd quit, and it was always like that. My dad was the provider for our family. We couldn't depend on Mom making enough money to do much of anything, so Dad would work. He was just never motivated to do any better. He took the world as it was and never really expected any more from it than what it gave him. Mom always demanded more, and she always drove my dad. Of course, I can't remember her ever motivating him to do something that was actually good or that actually worked out. So I like to think that that Ford LTD sat outside, kind of sad, looking like it knew it was short for this planet. Dad, well, he hum-hawed around. He wasn't really sure he actually wanted to break the law. And Mom, Carol Sue, she just got angrier and angrier. She'd look at him, "You yellow son of a bitch." And him, Dad would say, "Now, Carolyn, don't you Carolyn me. Carolyn, I just don't think we really need to do this. I'll go back to work pretty soon." "Oh, no, you won't. And so what when you do? I'll only go back on strike a couple months after that. We are going to lose everything we have, Ray Jean." And Dad sat there with his head bowed down because he knew it was true. We were losing everything. Coal miners were always on strike, usually for some bullshit reason. When he worked, oh yeah, the money was really good. Problem is he would work for 2 or 3 months, and then the union would go on strike asking for something like higher wages or benefits or increased safety. They would go on strike for a good 6 months and go back to work with little or nothing accomplished. It happened all the time, so gradually we were losing every single thing we had. Mom and Dad going broke. And let me tell you, boys and girls, no better motivation on this planet than seeing the future full of nothing but poverty. That tends to get one off their ass. Still, my dad, I just don't know, Carolyn. You got a fucking pussy between your legs. What about your fucking children? You think I'm going to live like this? It's at that point right there that I picture that old Ford LTD out in that parking lot saying, "Oh shit." The car ended up missing. Denise and me, we woke up one morning, walked into the living room. Mom and Dad were sitting there in the living room, kind of this bleary-eyed look all over their face. "Hey, good morning, Dad," I said. "Hey, Brett. You all just get up?" Dad looked at me. "No, we've been up a while." "Oh, okay." Mom looks at us. "Someone stole the car last night." I looked at my mom. She was dead serious. So I looked over at Denise. Denise, my sister, was waiting for me to say something. I guess she was going to follow my lead. "Mom, oh, someone stole the car. Oh, I guess it's while we were asleep. Oh, God damn it." So I guess I'm supposed to play along. I mean, Mom and Dad know that Denise and me know they stole their own car. And Denise and me know that Mom and Dad know that Denise and me know they stole their own car. But they damn sure aren't acting like it. Even my dad is signaling that we need to follow suit. "Oh, it'll be okay, Carolyn." Okay. Some son of a bitch stole our car. What if they would have decided to break in? What then, Ray Jean? What would we have done? Would you have protected us? Dad is looking at Mom like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" You know, he's kind of got that bug-eyed look, mouth slightly open, kind of a gape, like, "What the fuck, dude?" "No, you wouldn't have done a damn thing. They could have come in here and robbed us blind or killed us, and you wouldn't have done anything." Mom's looking at Dad all accusingly like, "That's what you are, you fucking..." Welcome to this episode of the AnglerPhish podcast, where we visit the darkest corners of our online lives. I'm your host, Brett Johnson. The United States Secret Service called me the original Internet Godfather. How did I get that title? 39 felonies, a place on the United States Most Wanted list, an escape from prison, and I built the first organized cybercrime community, Shadow Crew. Shadow Crew was a precursor to today's darknet and darknet markets, and it laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels still operate today. This first season of the AnglerPhish podcast tells of my rise and fall as the world's first Internet Godfather. It's a fascinating story. You'll learn how cybercriminals think, how modern cybercrime came into being, and why it's so successful and hard to stop, and how I was able to turn from a life of crime to one of using the knowledge I acquired as a criminal to help protect others against the type of person I used to be. We were talking about Dad, and you had closed that out, or we had closed that out, by talking about how they used to bring me in, have me stripped down.
And they would criticize you like you weren't even in the room?
They would talk about body. They would do, today that would be called body shaming. There was not a term for that back then. But today that would be called body shaming.
Well, there was lots of that.
There was lots of that.
There was multiple levels of shaming, you know. It was, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, because there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
There's something
and
wrong
that's
with you.
not normal.
You are not, there's something
Is that
wrong
normal?
with you.
That's not normal, is it?
Yeah.
And so, just like you're not even there.
That's true.
And I think that speaks a lot to how we were property instead of actual children or people or even a human being. It wasn't that. We were owned and we were criticized as far as, is your penis large enough?
That was one of the questions.
What kind of question is that?
And I was a little overweight, so I had the he-hooters going on.
Yeah, but you know, I found out since we were kids, we were overweight at one point, but my gynecologist actually said to me, he said, so do you overeat? Is that associated with, you think that's a coping mechanism for being molested?
Jesus.
Because you can control your weight.
But you couldn't control that.
If you make yourself unattractive, maybe you won't be a victim.
Right.
And so he hit that nail on the head, you know, that's exactly what it was. But I had never had anybody come out and say that.
Because that was the only control you had.
Because I had control of what went in my mouth, and maybe that wouldn't happen as much. But I remember not just the body shaming, but there was always mental prowess. And you know, you said before that you made the decision to be a criminal and do the things you did that were illegal and in the crime sector. But I remember being a kid, and those things were applauded.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were.
Those ideas were applauded.
Yes, they were.
You know.
Well, I remember, you say that, I remember, I don't know how old I was. I was maybe 8 or 9. It's before Mom left Dad. And he used to say all the time, son, if you're going to break the law, do it right. Make sure it's feds, because at least then you get steak.
Yeah.
So there was that. But, you know, you mentioned the control thing, how you sought control and you got it by overeating.
Yeah, I did.
It was this past year, actually it's just been 2019, that I've started talking about. I didn't even know what it was, Denise. I had, when I was a kid, I don't know, I was maybe 8, 9, maybe a little younger than that. I would catch Mom and Dad gone, and I would urinate in the house. I would pee on the carpet, down the drain, in the sink, something like that. I had no idea. I didn't have a clue why I did that, and I chose to, I didn't talk about that publicly until this year. And when I started talking about it, I was at a conference, and I mentioned that, and had this person come up to me, and they had dealt with abuse victims. And they said that was not uncommon, that children do that when they're abused, because that's the only control they've got, is that.
I totally get that.
So.
I did the same thing.
Okay.
I did the same thing. And, you know, I think there's an element of almost, it's like a fear, terror.
Yeah.
And literally, I did that for years. And
of course, that feeds into the whole thing when they're telling you that there's something wrong with you.
Oh, yeah.
Because normal people don't do that.
Right. Well, you know, here's the thing. We're not normal.
Well, that's true.
And so you just have to accept that and go on, because that's just how it's going to be. It's not going to get better. That's just how it is. You can deal with a certain amount of it, and you try to process it. And then for me, I did that for years.
Okay.
Years. I mean, I would try to make it to the bathroom, and I would think that I didn't have to go to the bathroom. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I'd pee on myself. I figured out it's associated when I'm thinking about all this. If I can push this back and I'm not dealing with it, or I'm not reminded of it, or somehow triggered by something else, and the strangest things will trigger those feelings and memories. And so
Oh yeah, smell.
Pee all over yourself.
A location, anything will trigger it.
Just absolutely pee all over
Absolutely.
yourself. Or mine went further than that. I mean, mine included like literally hurting myself, you know.
Right.
I'd never heard of anybody like cutting themselves or things like that. But I was doing things like that
Sure.
long before I ever heard of someone doing that.
Because at least you control that.
Exactly. Intentionally hurting yourself.
Right.
Like a compulsion. Almost can't help yourself. You can't help but do it. And so, yeah, I think that's a result of that abuse.
I agree. And you know, of course, this is a crime podcast. that
And
we're
your
talking
crime, I wonder if, because you knew, I mean, there's a certain amount of arrogance that you display, but at the end of the day, I mean, you've been in jail multiple times.
Right.
This started, and I'll talk about like our 8th grade, but this started years ago. And so we would have conversations, and I would say to you, Brett, don't do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
If you're in doubt somehow, come and ask me, and I'll tell you if it's
Well, you know,
stupid.
so crime.
But you kept doing it.
You know, the first real crime I committed.
When you're doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing, and
Right.
you know that you would get in trouble for it, and you would get
You do it
sentenced to
anyway.
jail, and you know
Yeah.
nobody wants to go to jail,
Right.
then not only do you do it, but then you would flaunt it in front of the people who would put you in jail, who would come after you.
I'm guilty of
You
that.
would
I
intentionally
am guilty of that.
antagonize them. And so I wonder if that's not a form of hurting yourself.
Well, I think it probably is. So, you know, of course, when I was a child, you know, I stole some Matchbox cars as a young kid. But the first real crime was that shoplifting stuff, you know. You had, Mom had been gone for a few days, that negligence that you'd spoken about.
Well, we didn't have any food.
Didn't have any food, and
We didn't
I
have any
remember it different
clothes.
than you.
We didn't have
Right.
any. I had 2 pairs of underwear, like
You had
I
a couple
said
pairs of
before.
underwear. We didn't have any food. You come in. I remember it as
It started with the soap and toilet paper
Sure.
from Pizza Hut because we didn't have either of those things. And so I was hungry. We had commodity cheese, that 5-pound
we did have
block
commodity
of
cheese. That was good cheese.
That's all we had, though. There was nothing that you ate with the cheese.
You didn't have bread or anything like that.
You
You
only
had
had the
cheese.
cheese.
Cheese and a cheese slicer.
And so after a while, how much commodity cheese can you eat? You know, that stuff stops you up. And so, I'm
Which
serious.
is why you have to have the toilet paper.
So, and even the commodity cheese runs low. You're talking 2 kids, days and days, just cheese. That's it, and butter.
And for those of
and
the
butter.
listeners out who don't remember commodity cheese, the government used to give out these big 5-pound blocks of government cheese, commodity cheese and butter.
Similar to Velveeta, only a little
Right.
larger. So think about eating just that and the butter.
That's it. That's
And
it.
so that was about the time that I decided she wasn't going to hit us anymore. That was along the same lines. This was pre me hitting her back. And so we were in the basement. You and I were in the basement, locked in the basement, and grandparents and evil cousins upstairs. No food, no opportunities. And I was like, you know what? Enough. So I went over to the A&P, and I was like, the grocery store. And so I was like, I saw a pack of ham. And I
remembered it as pork chops, but it's evidently ham.
it was
That's what it was.
It was a pack of ham to
Okay.
start with. And so I was like, you know what? We're going to have some friggin' ham. That's what we're going to do. Let's see how this goes. And so
Let's see how this goes.
I shoplifted the ham. I did. Because I'd already taken the toilet paper and the soap.
And
This
I
was
wanted
just
to know
another
how
step.
you'd done it.
And I was like, well, what do you think I'm going to do? And so I brought it home, and I was like, I got us some ham. Let's eat.
So we start stealing food.
I couldn't figure out how to steal a loaf of bread.
I remember that. Do you remember how we did that?
What?
So the way we did that, because you could not stuff a loaf of bread down your pants or in your
Right.
shirt because it'd squish it.
Right.
And that's when we started stealing clothes right there.
Yep.
Because I went over, Kmart was across the way. I went over to Kmart and got a hoodie, and you could put the loaf of bread down in the sleeve of the hoodie and walk out with it.
Right.
So-
now you got sandwiches.
Now you got sandwiches.
Not only do you have ham and cheese, you've got a sandwich.
got sandwiches.
and
you
if
could
you
put
got a
2 li-
sandwich, you're big time.
and you could put a 2-liter of soda down in the sleeve too and walk out with it.
Right.
So that's
So we went from just necessities of let's have some food.
Right.
We're going to eat.
Now we're going to
Enough.
determine what we're
Enough.
eating.
Now we're going to have soda to go with it. So let's have some
So
of
we
that.
started stealing clothes.
Yeah.
Well, then you find out once you
Because
get...
when you try to wash out your panties in the
That's
sink
right.
with the soap
That's right.
from Pizza Hut, it doesn't really clean them very well. So it started with that. And then, of course, Mom had been gone like 3 or 4 days on her party run.
Oh, yeah.
She comes back and
We've got food.
we've got food. Where the hell did that come from? And so you're the one that
Well, by
ended
this
up
point...
breaking it to her because I wasn't going to tell her.
Right.
I was like,
No, you
I'm
told
not-
her. I told her we found it. Your ass
that's
stands
right.
up. We stole it.
That's right, because she was all, I'm thinking, you
By this
left
point, I've
us
got-
here with nothing. I mean, we had a mattress on a poured
Yeah.
concrete floor. No
And I remember it as
pillows,
more
no
than 3 or
sheets,
4
no
days.
blanket, just a mattress. That's so much fun. Do you know how much fun it is? sleeping
It
on the
had to be
floor
more
with
than 3 or
roaches
4
crawling over
days. It had to be more than 3 or 4 because by that point I've got an Intellivision because you figure out you
yeah.
can take the hoodie and not only steal clothes using the hoodie,
get other
but
stuff.
you can get other clothes. Not only other clothes, but video
Stuff.
games, toys, stuff.
you. Yeah, let's have some stuff.
Let's get some stuff.
Yeah,
And she sees all this bullshit.
and she's like, that's a great idea.
That's exactly right.
And what's even better is I'm going to use you two to get me some stuff.
Not only that, but I'm going to get my mom. So it's grandmother, mom, Denise, and Brett.
Yeah, she can come pick her some stuff out too, and
Yeah.
Denise and Brett can pack it out for us.
Yep.
So I remember them taking us to the mall over in Virginia.
So we had taken
'Cause there
several
wasn't one
trips.
around there.
We had taken several trips, and
Oh, yeah.
where it came to an end
So much fun.
was the Fort Thomas Mall in Kingsport. Is Kingsport or Bristol?
It was in a JCPenney's.
Yeah, that was at the Fort Thomas Mall. So what happened is usually you guys would go to JCPenney's and steal whatever the hell was being stolen, clothes, jewelry, whatever. I'd go to the bookstore and make a book run and steal books. And that's what happened that day. So they had an S10 Blazer. We were supposed to meet back at the Blazer. So I go and steal a shitload of books in the hoodie, of course.
Yeah.
Bring the hoodie full of books back. No one's there at the Blazer. And I'm like, what
See,
the hell?
I saw it as, I hated that because I was like, it's one thing, in my opinion, it was one thing that I was stealing things to eat or because I didn't have any clothes or toilet paper or whatever. That was one thing. But then when the adults who are supposed to be providing things like that for you and taking care of you, somebody's supposed to be taking care of you, but that's not happening. Not only are they not providing that for you, but now it's your turn to get me stuff.
Right.
So it would be, we're going to go in JCPenney's and I'm shopping and I'm going to pick out what I want. And now you are going to steal that for me.
Right.
That's what it amounted to.
So that specific
and so I was
day,
like, this is not stuff that I have to survive.
and see, I never viewed it that way. You had a much better moral compass than I did because for you it was survival. For me, I saw that as springboarding off into stuff. All right, and
It wasn't
that's where,
the stuff, and I hated it because, I thought somewhere in my child brain, there was always hope. There was always hope that things would turn out right and something would happen and it would trigger things to turn out right.
And see, right there, that's the difference between me and you right there.
And it never worked that way.
You had that hope that things were going to turn out.
I had hope.
Right. I had already
Which was foolish.
And I had already dismissed that and figured out that things are only going to turn out if you make them turn out.
Yeah. So, when I said to her I'd stolen the food,
Right.
when she was asking about that when she'd come back from her party run, and I admitted that I'd stolen it, defiance, I was like, I'm going to say this, and this will be the thing that kicks her in gear. And
Nope.
she'll be like, oh, wow, because that's what happens on TV. When I see stuff on TV, things work out. And maybe this time that's what's going to happen. Things are going to be, no, that's not what happened
No,
at
that's
all.
not what happened at all.
Instead, what happened was, this is a great opportunity for me.
Right.
And so let's see if I can get you to do this for me.
And
Oh,
by
yeah,
that
I
point,
can definitely get
so
you.
sure, that was your
Because you
issue.
never say no.
And by
You
that
can't
point,
say
I'm
no.
already. You're only going to fix this if you fix it. So you're hoping someone will come in and fix it. I've already decided nobody's fixing it. So let's go. And that's where the shoplifting shit ends, at Fort Thomas Mall. I was waiting out there at the S10 Blazer. You all are not to be seen. I knew you were in JCPenney's. I wait out there a while, hide the books under the S10 Blazer, walk into JCPenney's. As I'm walking in, standing in the entryway there are 2 security guards, and I hear the name Brett Johnson come over one of their walkie-talkies. And I stopped right there, and I'm like, that's me. And they're like, you're Brett Johnson? I'm like, yeah, come with us. So I walk, they lead me to the security room where they've got you 3 up there. Grandmother and mom are huddled in a corner, hugging each other, screaming, crying, explaining how they've never done this before. It's a mistake, blah, 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 blah. You're in the opposite corner, just pissed off. I mean, you are just angry.
Because it wasn't the first time. This had been going on for quite some time. And, you know, it was just another thing. I think it was one of the things that helped me decide that I wasn't going to take it. It was just amping it up and getting me psyched for, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get away from you. And I'm not going to have to do this.
No, absolutely.
One day I won't. And so I'm sitting there and I was like, total lie, total crap. Not only have you done it before, you've done it so many times before. And
well, you were always the honest one about that.
How is it that never anybody catches on? How is this? And so...
Because sometimes people can live their own whole lives like that and never face consequences.
Never face
consequences. That's exactly right.
And so, anyway, they really didn't have to face a lot of consequence for that either.
Well, they used us on that. Do you remember how they got out of that? So they pressed charges. The cops did not want to put them in jail that night because then they would have had to have done something with me and you.
Yeah.
So they let them go.
But you know what? I look back on that and I think you and I would have been so much better off if they had have done something with us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would have done something.
You know, today parents might threaten their kids with, you know, if you call social services, they're going to take you and you're going to put you in a foster home. Oh, my God.
Absolutely.
A foster home?
That would have probably been the best thing in the world.
That would have been. I mean, even if we were being sexually abused in the foster home, you know, it's like the notorious thing. That was no different than what was happening.
No.
I had that and everything else. So put me in the friggin' foster home.
Right. That was the first real crimes I committed right there.
But you remember when they would take us and give us the buckets?
See, I didn't remember
stand
you
on the
with
corners?
the buckets.
I was with the buckets.
So for those who don't know, and there's a lot out there.
Collecting money on the corner
She's
of the
telling you right there.
shopping
So,
centers.
you know, you see these homeless people or these people on the side of the road raising money for whatever. Please give. And bar none,
Kids are great to collect money.
Yeah, there's always somebody in the crowd that says, hey, don't give those people money because they probably got a house. They're probably doing really well. They don't really need it. They're scamming. Turns out that a lot of the times, at least in our circumstance, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
They would give us a bucket. We'd have a sign that said for spousal abuse center, for needy children, whatever.
Yeah.
And we'd stand on the side of the road or in the shopping center collecting money.
Not in Hazard, though.
Not in Hazard. We'd have to take a road because they didn't want them to know
who we were.
So we'd drive, 60, 80 miles out someplace and set up shop for that Saturday and Sunday.
So we could collect some money for them.
Yeah. So we did that. And as I got older, I mean, you got away from that because, again, you had a better moral compass. But as I got older, I got more involved because, again, that's that Eastern Kentucky mentality. The male is expected to be there anyway. So come now. But
I think the way that Mom, some of the mental abuse that she did, I think that you were willing to do more to please her. And in a lot of ways, you're like her dad.
Yeah.
You act a lot like him.
Yeah.
And I can remember when she was little when you were little, a lot of things that she said to you were that you weren't her son. She didn't love you.
Right.
She had disowned you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, there were a few disownings.
There was lots of that. And, now as
when
an
you're
adult,
5 and 6, that has
you can look at somebody who says, I disown you, and be like,
so?
I don't care.
Yeah, so?
I don't care. But when you're a kid and it's your parent, and
It has an effect.
it certainly does. And so I think,
And, you know, I got more involved with the types of crime, you know, document fraud, faking accidents, stolen cars, all that.
yeah,
But I think you
Laundering
pointed
money.
it out, laundering money. And you pointed out in the
fencing
last...
stolen goods.
Fencing stolen goods. And you pointed out in the last episode, you said, until I had my breakdown.
Yeah.
That's what you said.
We were doing the shoplifting, we were doing the collecting the money. She was out partying. We were living in the basement. Our grandparents wouldn't feed us. We had no clothes, no food. All this stuff was kind of going on at the same time. Dad was in Florida, and so we were in that basement. And Dad would call, or we could call him, collect from the payphone at the hospital.
Right.
And so you had went there to call him and had a conversation with him. He had told you that he had a girlfriend, and you got in the elevator, and a lady got in the elevator that was blonde. Come to find out, she looked a lot like our mother. And you just went off on her and started wailing on her.
Yeah.
So the initial call from the police was that you had raped her, assaulted her, robbed her.
Tried to kill her.
And tried to kill her. And so...
And none of that had happened. What had happened was I had beaten this woman up. The sad thing about that, I mean, the whole thing is sad. I mean, I had...
It was months later that I actually found out that the woman looked like our mother, because I didn't hear all this story until months later. You know, they had you in solitary confinement there in the county jail because you were so young, and months in solitary confinement, I might add. And so months later, Mom let it slip that they had sent a psychiatrist or somebody in to talk to you, and that the woman looked like Mom. And that's when I put it all together, and I was like, holy shit. You know, the reason why is because, now this is what I thought and what I think today is, you find out that Dad's got somebody else now, so Dad's not coming back. The family unit is not going to be restored in all its dysfunction, and it's Mom's fault. And so you attack this woman because she looked like her. And if she had been there, she would have gotten it, which she so deserves.
Well, I don't think anybody deserves what I did.
I have to disagree.
I was charged with first-degree assault.
Oh, you paid for it. You paid for it dearly.
I spent, 6-8 months in the county jail.
8 months.
Solitary on that. And I was 14 or 15.
14.
So I spent 8 months in solitary confinement, and for years.
And then they sent you to a group home after that.
Yeah, for mental evaluation. For years, for decades, I had told people that I did not remember anything that happened in that elevator. And the truth of the matter is I remember every single thing that happened in that.
So is it because she looked like Mom, and that's what it was? You were lashing out because?
Probably. I was certainly not rape or anything. There was none of that. Nor was I charged with anything like that.
Yeah, they dropped those charges because it didn't happen. And they found her wallet.
Yeah.
But that woman did not deserve that.
No,
but
nobody
our mother
deserved
that.
Nah, see, I don't think anyone deserves anything like that, regardless. You know, when you're that young, man, I mean, I don't want to give an excuse. I did that. I don't want to give an excuse. I did that. Was it a breakdown? Yeah, it was. Yeah, goddamn, it was a breakdown. It was a fucking breakdown, all right.
You could not handle one more thing. And so I totally get it. Totally get it.
You know, I don't. I still don't. To this day, I don't get it.
I absolutely get it. And, you know, I think when you're pushed to the point that you're finally at a point like that, you're not dealing with being rational.
Well, that's certainly true. And
it's beyond rational.
And certainly after, you know, before that happened, I got in several fights in school.
Oh, we were always fighting.
Yeah.
But I was always fighting. You were always fighting.
Yeah. But, you know, after that and to this day, I've never touched another human being.
Looking back on it as a child, I was so angry.
Sure. Sure.
And so I could sit in our house with all that was going on. The fighting, of course, that was minor. The homicidal tendencies that were going on
Not
there.
so minor.
From various people, there was so much of that.
Yeah.
All of that, I could sit there and almost disconnect myself from it. But the truth is that it was still there, and it was all just boiling on the inside.
Right.
And so I had lots of little meltdowns.
And I wish to God I'd never done that. I don't know, I guess hardly a day goes by that I don't think that, even today. So we're talking, I'm 49, we're talking, 30 years later? And I know that it certainly affected my victim's life. I'm sorry for the effect of that. And it continued to affect mine for years after that.
The fact of the matter is, I think if that hadn't happened, you probably would have killed somebody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that if that release hadn't, if I hadn't
If it
broken
had
there,
continued to build,
it would have.
You would have killed somebody.
It certainly would have. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
I mean, I can say to you that the thought has gone through my head many times.
And it affected everybody, man. So certainly my victim, it destroyed her life. With you had to face the consequences with that. You had the brother that did that.
No.
In a small area.
I think the biggest effect of that on me was I didn't have you.
Well, yeah, because,
You weren't there.
So I get out, 8 or 9 months later.
That was a big thing. You were not there with me.
Yeah.
And how much I missed you. And then there was guilt. I had so much guilt because I was like, I let him get to that point.
Well, you couldn't stop that.
What should I have done? What could I have done? And then the whole rage toward the situation that we were in and the inability to be able to fix that.
Well, and that's what, and
that.
honestly, that may have been part of the reason that you were able to get out much sooner, because at that point, you and I kind of get split up from school and everything else. So we're in Perry County.
Yeah. So the best school is Hazard High School.
And they had 3 high schools. They had Napier, they had Hazard High School, and then they had Dills Combs, which was on the outskirts of town. So the first stop, of course, because we were closer to Napier, the first stop was Napier High School. And I wasn't even allowed in the door. The kids meet me at the door. Tell me I'm not allowed there, and threaten violence. It was like a mini riot outside of the high school.
Because we enrolled ourselves. Remember that?
So the next one is
We enrolled ourselves actually in middle school.
Yeah, so the next one is Mom takes me and you over to Hazard High School. I'm sitting outside. I think you were out there with me. The principal tells Mom that you're welcome there, but I'm not.
Well, they didn't want either one of us.
But he said he would take you.
Yeah.
So Mom comes out and says it, and at that point, I didn't know what to do. I told Mom, I was like, look, please God, just take me to this high school at the outskirts of the county. Just please, please do that. And
really, you know what? That was the best place for you.
Oh, geez, it was wonderful,
You had
man.
Carol Combs, who
who
took you under her wing.
Yeah, she.
And then you had Robert.
Yeah, you go to Hazard, and I go up to Dills Combs, and that's where I met my first decent person outside of the family, Carol Combs.
Yep.
English teacher, and I went on to. I excelled there. They knew who I was, but they accepted me in there.
Yeah.
And I went on to become head of the academic team. I went to theater, became best actor in the state, head of mock trial, head of everything, and actually excelled there, did really well. And had friends all of a sudden. Friends who knew, I never mentioned it to them, but they knew who I was and what I had done, and they still accepted me.
Yeah. And you had good friends there, too.
Had good friends.
I think that Carol had a lot to do with that.
She did.
By the way she treated you.
She did.
And she took you under her wing. She saw the potential in you.
And, while I was there was no crime. I stopped that bullshit, and I was becoming a healthy person.
And that lasted I was there for 2 years. And of course, when that ends, when you're out of high school, you were fortunate enough, you realized that much sooner than I did that you needed to get out of that. So you go to Berea.
Well, that was just part of me being defiant. I was like, I'm going regardless. And you had opportunities to leave.
I did. And I
But
did not.
Mom tightened the screws on you.
Yeah. And I did not leave.
And so you had that full scholarship to UT.
Yeah, I had a couple of scholarships.
And you had the one out California, Berkeley.
Yep.
And you didn't take either one of those.
Right.
She talked you out of that.
Yeah.
And so you stayed.
So I stayed, and I got involved in more crime, from faking accidents to stolen cars to laundering money to document fraud to benefit fraud, insurance fraud, helping run illegal coal mines.
And stripping.
Helping to
Do you
grow
remember
marijuana.
when we used to have to intercept the feds? Did you ever have to do that?
I don't know if I
Coming
did
up
or
to
not.
check the
Oh, yeah. So,
strip
on
mining,
the strip mine, the
blocking
illegal
the
coal
road?
mine, we would be, so, hell, I'm what, 16, 17
Because
at this
they'd
point.
confiscate the equipment.
And so you would have to watch.
That was high school, though.
Yeah, that was high school. So, I mean, we were more aware of everything that was going on.
We would pretend the car was broken down
Oh, yeah.
to block the road.
Yeah. So you'd
'Cause you
park
can't
there, and
block
as the
the
police
road.
come, the car would be, we're broken down.
We're just these poor, pitiful kids.
Yeah,
you know.
so stealing coal, all that stuff. And that was the crimes, man. I mean, that was it. So,
Yeah. I had a teacher in high school, Mr. Arthur, who was a math teacher. He taught algebra and geometry. And so I had supposed to be an algebra class, and this was like 9th grade. And so I didn't go to class. And that was when we were like stealing tests and selling them and things like that.
oh, hell,
Remember
I
that?
forgot about you remember me being, not expelled, but suspended.
Questioned.
I was suspended for stealing a test. So we were it was before I got to Dills Combs. I was at Whitesburg High School. And this kid, his name was Jesse McBee. We were in French class, and it was like a 72 average, 68 or 72 average. I had to have an A on the final exam just to pass the class. So Jesse comes to me and he was like, I know where the final exam is. And I was like, you do? And he was like, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, show me that. So he had put toilet paper in the door so it wouldn't lock. So we got in the teacher's room, got the test out during lunch, went downtown, photocopied the test. Of course, we were both idiots. We had no idea what the questions were because it was in French. We hadn't studied. So we're like, how do we even answer these? We've got the test, we don't even know what it's asking. So we put the test back on the desk. We go to the top people in the class, show them the test and say, answer the damn things for us. And we start selling the test. The next day, of course, someone has ratted us out. Principal calls us in. I get suspended for 10 days right during finals week. Jesse gets suspended. Principal looks at me, I know you're the mastermind. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was his idea to steal the test. I know you're the mastermind. He would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
Definitely did that.
We were also fencing stolen goods during that time.
Oh, yeah.
But Mr. Arthur, I went to class one day, and it was near the end of the year.
Well, you'd get a list of what the kids wanted to steal.
Right.
You'd go and steal the shit
And then
sell
deliver
it
it.
to them.
Exactly. But we needed the money
Yeah.
to buy bread.
Well, we were stealing bread. We needed the money for something.
Putting it in the sleeve was not easy.
Needed money for something.
And yeah, you can't pay the water bill on stolen
Yeah.
groceries and underwear
So,
and things.
yeah, the crime. So we came by it naturally. And of course, as I got older, I got more involved. And finally, I mean, you got out by going to Berea.
Well, Mr. Arthur, actually,
He was the one that did that for you?
he actually kind of turned me around in that I went to his class near the end of the term, and he had put up a problem in algebra class. And so he said, I don't think y'all can solve this. And so I sat in the back, and everybody knew that I was like trouble. And so I didn't usually come to class.
That one's trouble.
And so he came around, and I was the only one in the room that had the question right. I had figured out the answer. And so he's like, how do you do this? I thought he was thinking I cheated, which I had the answer keys for most classes. And so anyway, I did end up showing him how I'd done it. And so he was like, I'd never seen that before, and it's correct. And yeah. And so he said to me as I was leaving, why don't you come to class tomorrow?
Well, why don't you try to attend tomorrow?
And so
just sit in with us.
So I went, and make a long story short, I ended up going to his geometry class the next time after Algebra 1, which I passed. He gave me like a D-, I so didn't deserve. And anyway, did great in geometry, and then signed up for his Algebra 2, which I didn't get to go to because we'd moved. But anyway, he just had some faith in me and showed me that I might be able to do the school thing.
Sure.
And so I was like, that's a possibility. And then I saw that too, that thinking about, I got to get out of here. That might be a possibility for a means to get out.
Right. So that's how you got out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
of course, I would take a while longer to get out.
Yeah. I mean, you had lots of talent, and
well,
Carol
we were
Combs
both
saw
scary
that.
smart, right? I mean, that was part of the problem, is that we were both very bright people.
Well, thank God we were given that gift.
Yeah. We were both very
we were
bright.
given some intelligence.
All right, so that was part 5 of the AnglerPhish podcast, where I detailed some of my past crimes and talked about those victims. Without further ado, we're going to go right into part 6, Getting Away, where me and my sister Denise talk about trying to get out of that horrible situation. Enjoy, for lack of a better word. Denise got away long before I did. I stayed in Eastern Kentucky and in my mom's orbit for years after Denise left. I mean, I could have left sooner, and I almost did. I had scholarships coming out of high school for theater, debate. I turned them down for a variety of reasons. My girlfriend, fear, being manipulated by my mom. I did almost make it out shortly after graduating high school. I was attending Hazard Community College. Hazard had hired a new theater director, Gary Ellenberger. Gary had a PhD, and Hazard was damn proud of their professor. But certainly Gary had problems. He was in his late 40s, and he liked girls much younger than he was. No, not illegal young, but icky young. He was probably 48, fell in love with an 18-year-old student. Gary lasted about 8 months at Hazard Community College before he was thrown out for trying to elope with the 18-year-old. Oh yeah, Gary and Beth, that was her name, had planned it to run off to Virginia and get married after play rehearsal one evening. Turns out Beth couldn't keep a secret. She told her sister told the parents. The parents show up the night of the attempted eloping and escort Beth out of the building. Gary, well, he goes crazy, starts trashing the college, throwing computers, breaking windows, the whole 9 yards. I'm standing there watching all this like, what the fuck? When the cops show up, arrest Gary for destruction of property. Gary was fired as soon as he got out of jail. Now, that being said, Gary Ellenberger was a good theater director, and he had some good contacts. One of those contacts was Edward F. Emanuel. He was head of the theater department at San Jose State University. Ed Emanuel's main claim to fame at the time was he had written a screenplay for the movie Three Ninjas, a film about 3 kids who were, yeah, you guessed it, ninjas. Gary had been one of Edward's students, and the first play Gary directed at Hazard Community College was a Civil War piece Ed Emanuel had written called A House Divided. Gary flew Edward into Hazard to see the production. I was the lead of the show, and after Gary saw the show, he offered me a full ride scholarship at San Jose State. I jumped at it and agreed on the spot. But I never got there. Edward flew back to California the next day. He said he'd be back in a couple of weeks to see me, work things out for the scholarship. 2 weeks later, Emanuel pulls into the yard as I'm shooting basketball with some friends. I walk over to him and shoot the shit for a couple of minutes before saying I'll walk him in to meet my mom. He looks at me, "Oh, don't bother, Brett, I can handle it. Go back to shooting ball. Me and your mom will talk for a few minutes." Idiot me doesn't think anything of it. I go back to playing basketball. Edward disappears inside to talk to my mom. He's in there about 20 minutes before he comes out, white as a sheet, gets in the car, doesn't say a word to me, drives away. And I never hear from him again. Takes about 2 weeks for me to find out what happened. Emmanuel was telling my mom what a great opportunity this was for me. She pulls a knife. Actually, she says she will gut him from elbow to asshole if she steals her son. That kind of broke my back on leaving for a while. I started dating Christy, got engaged, and continued my criminal career. I wouldn't get away for another 5 years, not until Christy broke up with me and I met Susan. Christy, she was a preacher's daughter. I'm well-versed biblically, but not a believer. Severe lack of faith brought on by having a mother claiming to sell her soul to Satan and believing shit like a social security number was the mark of the beast tends to have an effect on a child's faith. Now, I loved Christy, but we grew apart because of their religion. We were together for 5 years. Christy realized I was never going to be a believer, and she broke up with me. She had a little of that grass is maybe a little greener on the other side shit going on. And hell, it probably was. I mean, I certainly was not a catch. I was breaking the law. I had no job. I was pretty useless. So Christy breaks up with me, and I end up marrying Susan within 8 months. Welcome to this episode of the AnglerPhish podcast, where we visit the darkest corners of our online lives. I'm your host, Brett Johnson. The United States Secret Service called me the original Internet Godfather. How did I get that title? 39 felonies, a place on the United States Most Wanted list, an escape from prison, and I built the first organized cybercrime community, Shadow Crew. Shadow Crew was a precursor to today's darknet and darknet markets, and it laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels still operate today. This first season of the AnglerPhish podcast tells of my rise and fall as the world's first Internet Godfather. It's a fascinating story. You'll learn how cybercriminals think, how modern cybercrime came into being, and why it's so successful and hard to stop, and how I was able to turn from a life of crime to one of using the knowledge I acquired as a criminal to help protect others against the type of person I used to be. We've talked about mom, dad, the whole crime bit, as a young man before I get involved into cybercrime and branching out on my own. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of how both of us got away. And the way that I get away from that segment of my life was through my relationships. And I'm not sure if you were like that or not, Denise.
Not entirely. I mean, in a certain respect, there were people in my life that always seemed to be there when I needed somebody to be emotionally supported,
right.
An anchor almost. So I had a friend that I'd made at Hazard High School, Carol Brown, who was that friend for me.
Sure.
And so she had went to Berea, and so I went to Berea because I could afford to go to Berea, go and work your way through, and that was a wonderful opportunity. And she gave me that string or that anchor that I needed to support me enough for me to be able to step out and do that. We were talking last time about you and your relationships and how, you got stuck in that. You had opportunities.
Sure.
Really, full scholarship,
right.
full ride, UT, full ride to University of California at Berkeley. The San Jose thing was
right.
Just these amazing opportunities, and you didn't take them because I think you didn't have that support. You didn't have enough to be able to break free.
Well, there's a few things that I think that you're probably right on the support. The bigger thing for me, and it's always been that way for me, is having that other person in my life. All right, so I didn't have the love of the parents necessarily, okay? So it became important for me that my main goal, even today, my main goal is to have someone that loves me, okay? So
Which
my
is
first,
normal. I think
Well,
everybody wants somebody to love them.
I think it's normal, but not to the degree that I take it a lot of the times, all right? So when my first real girlfriend was a girl named Christy, her dad was a preacher, and I had these scholarships, certainly, and because I had someone there that loved me, that wanted to be with me, that took priority over every scholarship, over every single thing that I was doing. So she became my life. For 5 years. I was with her for 5 years. And that ended.
You know, it's interesting you say that. And I truly believe that Christy loved you.
Absolutely.
With all her heart. And I truly believe you loved her. And it's interesting that you bring up that it ended after 5 years, because in my own personal relationships, I have difficulty getting close to anybody.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I wonder, you know, if it ended with her because she was too close.
And it could have been. I mean, it's so, you know, a lot of my life circles around that fear of being abandoned, of having the people that are important to you leaving. Okay, so when I break the law, typically that's so I can get the cash to show them how much I love them, instead of saying it or showing it through a relationship. I say it
Because you're
through,
not good enough.
right? Because I'm not good enough.
Just you are not good enough. And I think I've had those same feelings of they're going to find out one day.
Oh yeah, yeah. They'll see that. They'll see through the facade that I'm not good enough.
Exactly. And then it'll be over.
Right.
So don't get too close to them. I won't let myself get too close, because
Sure.
then it won't hurt as bad.
Right.
You know, it'll be okay. You just move on. And I wonder if you and Christy didn't work out because of something similar.
Well, I
Was
think
that
that's
true?
a lot of it. I really think that's a lot of it. And today, people who knew me back then with my relationship with her, they often say, that would have been the one right there. That would have been the one. Now, I am very happily married to my wife right now. I love her to death. And everything.
Michelle's
She's a great
awesome.
woman. But back then, that would have been the one for me at that point. And, you know, of course, I shit around on it. So I didn't cheat on her, but she found out that I'd talked to this girl. And at the same time, I was not, and she and I have actually talked, last year we talked for a while about this. But at the same time, from her point of view, she was very, very big in Christianity. She's not as much now, but back then she was very big in Christianity, and I was not. I mean, I went to church every weekend, but I was not a believer.
Well, we kind of had Christianity from a
Right.
different
Exactly.
exposure. I mean, it was, you know, it's like saying to somebody, almost I'd imagine like saying to somebody who was in a cult,
Right.
you want to go to church? Hell no.
Exactly.
No, I don't really. I mean, because of the experience.
Absolutely.
You can't, our mother had a whole warped thing of religion, like most everything else.
Oh,
but
yeah.
religion was a big one. And so you can't help but think about that in terms of looking at religion right now.
Right.
Would I like to go to church? I kind of would. But there's a part of me is like, I don't know. Because of that, I think that's part of it.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right.
But back to you and Christy, do you think that's because you were trying to push her away?
Yeah, I think that, you know, with me, a lot of it is,
She was too good for you?
she's too good for me. It can't be as good as this. You know,
Something's
blah, blah,
gonna
blah, blah.
happen.
The hammer's going to fall at some point.
Yeah.
I've not proved myself enough. Blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And at the same time, she's on the other side. And we had this talk, like I said, last year. And she was on the other side saying, well, he's not really involved in church. I can, you know, maybe I can find a better. So we both were going through that at the same time. And of course, it falls apart. And we were both kind of
And there
hard-headed.
was your family.
There was the family.
What she knew about
Absolutely.
the family.
And she knew the criminal aspects and everything else.
Yeah, and you know,
So-
that's a lot for anybody
Oh,
to
absolutely,
process.
absolutely.
You really want to get involved with something like that.
So, of course, it falls apart. And I can understand that. I mean, we both understand that. And within 6 months, actually within 8 months of that relationship that went on for 5 years ending, I am married to another woman.
Yeah. And, okay, so, and the woman that you married
Susan.
was so much like our mother.
She was. And I don't know if I ever told you this.
Shockingly.
Yeah, I knew who she was I was at the community college, and I knew who she was because basically she slept with every person around at that point, and acted very slutty in school. She was a very pretty girl, but
She was okay.
yeah, this guy comes up to me, a buddy of mine comes up to me, he's like, man, the prettiest girl in the school is right down the hall there. And I'm like, where? He's like, come with me. And it turned out it was Susan, and I'm like, okay. So she's sitting there talking to two guys, and I of course, it was that macho bullshit all of a sudden. I go in, and I'm standing there listening to her talking. These two guys are trying to win her over, and I finally looked over at her, and I'm like, hey, you want to get away from these idiots? That's the first words I said to her. You want to get away from these idiots? And they looked at me like, what did you say? And I was like, I asked her if she wants to get away from you two idiots.
Yeah.
And that was it. So I went to her, I went to her parents' home. She was living with her parents. Went to her parents' home the next night, and that was a complete nightmare. And of course, too blind here to see it or to accept it, but I walked in the house, and the house was like a hoarder's house. You had to literally kick garbage out of the way to find a path to walk through. You had to clear garbage off the couch. There was garbage in front of you, in your feet. I mean, it was piled up all over the place. Yeah. And I ended up dating her and marrying her within 6 months after meeting her.
Yep. I even said to you, I was like, don't do it. Let me tell you about her.
Oh, yeah.
And you were just dead set. I love her. I'm marrying her. And I was like, no. And yeah.
Yeah.
And she was mom.
And she was horrible. I mean, it was just.
And
I
you
knew
turned into dad.
I knew
what
the
can
day.
I do?
I knew the day that I got married, the day that I was marrying her. I said to myself, I don't need to do this. But at the same time, I was like, I guess a part of me thought, well, I'm getting out of here. We get married. I had faked a car accident. I don't know if you knew that or not.
To pay for the wedding?
I had faked a car accident to pay for the wedding. I had gotten the money from USAA, and I was sending USAA. I had the insurance where they would pay for lost wages. So I was forging a chiropractor's statement for lost wages, and I would send them this forged chiropractor statement once a month, and they would send me $800 a month, and that's what we paid our rent with until USAA finds out that it's all forgeries, and then they send someone down to say, hey, we're going to put you in jail. So we were married and living in Lexington by that point, and I was working at Lexmark. I was taking a full class load, and I was doing all the cooking and cleaning because Susan would not.
Right.
So I was doing all that, and of course, once that $800 disappears, the job at Lexmark, I was working 40 hours a week at that, and I couldn't do it all, man. I couldn't.
No.
Something had to give. What gave was a job, and by this point, I'm like, got to make money. So I started doing telemarketing and start doing telemarketing fraud as well. So that's the next avenue of crime in my life. And of course, you know, Susan, I don't think she knew she did know I was breaking the law. She knew I was breaking the law.
She knew, and it was just, what can he get me?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
So it was like, what the hell, man? And I continued up until I get involved in cybercrime and everything. But I mean, up until that point, started telemarketing fraud. Of course, what happens is I have to quit the job at Lexmark because I was just so tired I couldn't do it. So from there, I start working at a cemetery, booking.
I remember that.
Remember that I was working telemarketing at a cemetery, and the call was, "Hi, this is Brett Johnson from Bluegrass Memorial," and I said it right like that. "Hi, this is Brett Johnson calling from Bluegrass Memorial Gardens. We're having a promotion this week, and you have won a free gravesite." I said it exactly like that. So we were giving away free grave sites, and I was the guy who made a contest out of it. And I booked a lot of them. That lasted for, 4 to 6 months. I was bringing home some money doing that, but not a lot. I got fired on that because I started complaining about the job. The owner of the cemetery, the director, he wanted me to start selling grave spaces. And I was like, dude, I'm not doing that. And so he fired me the next day.
Oh, wow.
Because of that. Then I went over to Kroger, worked in the deli at Kroger, stole a lot of food out of Kroger while I was there because we had to eat. That lasted, I guess, 8 months. Oh, even before Kroger, the next place I went, they were selling this Diners Club card.
Is that about the time that you had to start paying the rent for real because
Exactly.
USA found out?
About the same time I had to pay the rent for real, and I started working at this the Lexington Diners Club, which they sold this little card that you paid $40 for the card, and you bought one meal at select restaurants, and they gave you another meal for free.
Okay.
So I started doing that, ended up breaking into their offices because I was only making, $200 a week. You can't pay the rent and eat on that. So I ended up I waited until everybody went home, went over there at midnight one night, broke into the office, stole like 400 of these cards, and started selling them myself. So, of course, I get caught doing that. It was easy enough to figure out who had stolen them. So I get arrested. I don't spend any time in jail, but I get arrested and charged with theft by deception was what that was. So the next job I have after that was working for the Shriners Club, the Shriners Circus. And man, I did well at that. I mean, I was making all kinds of money. I don't know, $800, $900 a week, just collecting donations from Shriners Club. That job ends and they move over into selling food baskets for the Kiwanis Club, which the money at that point was not nearly as good.
I remember that.
So I'm like, man, I got to make money somehow. So what I did was I stole their phone list.
And started calling yourself.
Started calling myself, telling them I was with the Kiwanis Club, and I would go around and collect money, either cash or check.
That bucket out on
Exactly.
The car.
I'd either collect cash or check, and I got arrested doing that. I went to Versailles, Kentucky to pick up some checks.
Wasn't it the police who you called and solicited? a
That's exactly
donation
what
from?
happened. One of the solicitors on the phone list, he was a Versailles police officer. I walk up to his porch. He was like, I've already called the Kiwanis Club. You're not with them. I was like, oh, well, thank you very much. I get back in the car, try to get my ass out of Woodford County. That's where it was. And I make it like 2 miles before the cops pull me over and arrest me. Spend 3 months in the county jail at that point for theft by deception again. And then...
See, that's what I was talking about, intentionally hurting yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You called and solicited.
Well, I didn't know he was a cop.
Okay. Yeah.
It was always that. So I spent 3 months in jail for that. We had lost our place we were renting in Lexington by that point. So I get out, and me and Susan, we have to move in with her parents. Is where we move in. And we end up sleeping on the living room floor amidst all that garbage. We have to clean the garbage away every night, lay a mat down and sleep on that. We were there for 3 months, and I'm like, dude, got to do something. Can't continue to do this because, you can't get a job in Hazard.
That's right.
So Paul, Susan's dad, he had purchased the 2 boys. So in the house, there was Susan's dad, her mom, me and her 2 brothers, and her sister. All right? And we slept in the living room. Their dad had bought the 2 boys a desktop computer. And I get over there every night trying to figure out how to make money, no idea how, and start pirating software. That's what I started. We're on these Wares channels, these like Pirate Bay and the Torrents Today. They had software then. So I got a copy of Adobe Photoshop and Microsoft Office and Microsoft Windows. Started selling those on this. It was a precursor to Craigslist. It was USA Classifieds was what it was. So I started selling those for $20 to $30 a pop with a crack that would turn it into the full-fledged software. And that's what I started doing there. So started selling that stuff and got enough money finally to move us out of that trailer, their mom and dad's trailer, back to Lexington, Kentucky. And by this point, I'm finding out there's money to be made in online crime.
Yeah.
The real first money I was doing pirated software that turned into installing mod chips into gaming systems. Back then, the gaming systems were the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. So I would install the mod chips in the system so you could play the pirated software. And then that turned into doing the same for cable boxes, cable television boxes, so you could watch all the TV.
Yes.
About the same time, I find out that I'm watching TV one night, and they've got these Beanie Babies. I find eBay, of course. I'm hooked on eBay. And I'm not real, I got a job, so I moved back to Lexington, Kentucky, get a job working at the J. Peterman Company, like from Seinfeld.
That's right.
I worked at J. Peterman. J. Peterman had all of the, this was when the movie Titanic was out. J. Peterman had bought all the movie props from Titanic, and man, they were selling like hotcakes. So you'd buy a life jacket for $200. You could sell it on eBay for $600. You'd buy a dinner plate for $195. They'd go for $600. All this other stuff, right? And they were in high demand. Well, me working at J. Peterman, I was able to see when the items were coming in. I could cancel other people's orders on those items, put my name or in the front list and buy the items and then sell them on eBay.
And make the profit.
And make money. So I started doing that. One morning, I get a knock at the door of the apartment that me and Susan were living at. And it's the police. I'm like, what the hell, man? Because by this point, I'm doing mod chips, pirated software, and the Titanic props from J. Peterman. So the cops come in, and I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you're selling Titanic props? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, where are you getting them? And I'm like, I'm getting them from J. Peterman. And he's like, how are you getting them from J. Peterman when no one else can get them? And I'm like, I work there. I know when the orders are coming in. And he looks at me, he's like, oh, you work there? I'm like, yeah, I work there. And he looks at me, he's like, well, shit, we don't even need to be here then. And I'm like, okay. So it turns out that cop, his name was Pat Tingle, all right? And I will come to know this guy.
Oh, no.
So he leaves. I go to work that day at J. Peterman. I'm fired that day.
Because they find out what you've been
Because
doing.
they find out I've been doing that. So now no job. The pirated software and the mod chips aren't really cutting it. I was on eBay anyway, and I'm like, got to make money somehow. Didn't know how until Bill O'Reilly's on TV one night talking about Beanie Babies. This one Peanut the Royal Blue Elephant was selling for $1,500. I didn't know you couldn't go down and buy one of these damn things. So I skipped school the next day, go around all the Hallmark stores looking for the Peanut thing. Can't find the little guy because he's on eBay for $1,500. But ingenuity kicks in. They had these little gray Beanie Baby elephants for $8. Pick one of those little guys up, stop by Kroger on the way home, pick up a pack of blue Rit dye, try to dye the little guy. He turns out looking like he's got the mange. But I sold him. I had a fake picture of a real one, put it online, sold him for $1,500. And that was the real first cybercrime I committed right there. That was the first one. And took to it like a duck to water after that. So yeah.
Wow.
All right, so that was episode number 65 of The Brett Johnson Show, the Anglerfish Flashback, parts 5 and 6. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Please, if you like the content, subscribe. If you don't like the content, subscribe and leave feedback regardless of what you like and don't like and what you'd like to hear about. I respond to every single bit of feedback unless someone is being an asshole, and then I won't. But I typically don't have many assholes on here. You guys are absolutely outstanding. So please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, let me know what you like, let me know what you want to hear about. We'll make sure we do that. We'll have a brand new episode out on Thursday as well. And what do we say as we close out our shows? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. More importantly, this is the Brett Johnson Show. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.